Just before the destruction of the Qin household, my stepmother arranged placements for the daughters in the household. My half-sister was sent to the prince's mansion to become a concubine. My stepmother's own daughter married the second-rank scholar of the imperial exam. And as for me, the legitimate eldest daughter, she sold me to the heir of the Xiao Duke's mansion as a maid. Ding! RoyalStory reminds you to click the subscribe button in the bottom right corner to read the complete novel. The Xiao Duke's mansion was quite large. Despite the clamor from the neighboring Qin household being raided, none of it reached here. When the effects of the drug wore off, I struggled to open my eyes. Lying on the bed, I watched the last ray of sunset disappear. I recalled my stepmother's feigned sorrow and her pretense of planning for our well-being. I felt a little dazed. Some time ago, Prince Min was suddenly demoted, causing anxiety in the capital. Following that, my stepmother arranged my half-sister's marriage, married off her own daughter, and then sold me. I did not know precisely what had happened. But my father, the Minister of Rights, did not oppose her actions. I knew as well. After today, the Qin family would no longer exist in the capital. Was I resentful that among the three sisters, only I was sold into servitude? It was hard to say. But at least I was still alive. I pushed my weakened body up, parched with thirst. The water jug in the room was empty, so I stumbled towards the well in the courtyard. I leaned over to fetch water, but my footing was unsteady. I had to support myself using the rim of the well. Suddenly, the world spun around me. I was yanked back forcefully and thrown to the ground. If you want to die, don't do it here. I looked up. Under the brilliant evening glow, beside the trumpet vine by the wall, a young man in dark riding attire, holding a horsewhip. Handsome, with a languid yet elegant demeanor, but now slightly angry. It was Xiao Duke, the owner of this place. The same Xiao Duke who could go from smiling to stabbing someone in a heartbeat. His erratic temperament was well known throughout the capital. I smiled bitterly, lowering my gaze. I'm not trying to die, just thirsty. His eyes lingered on me for a while. Want to go for a ride? Caught off guard by his question, I nodded instinctively. Xiao Duke wrapped me up, riding his blood-sweated horse, galloping down Zhuke Street and out of capital city. Amid the shouted curses, I saw my family about to embark on a 3,000-mile exile. We exchanged glances. This might be our last. But we were still alive, so there was a faint hope of seeing each other again. Wealth was as fleeting as clouds. The once noble Qin Shuyun, from now on, would just be Qin Shuyun. Upon Xiao Duke's command, I became his chief maidservant. I noticed many covert glances directed at me, but I pretended not to see them. That day, Xiao Duke came back reeking of alcohol and perfume, complaining about a headache. A flock of maidens rushed to help, supporting his head, holding his shoulders. They took over all the close tasks. I, the chief maid, was pushed out and left bewildered at the door. Everyone knew what to do, except me. Luli, a secondary maid, came out from the inner room, scolding me indirectly in a hushed tone. Every pot has its lid. Some people have high aspirations but low ability and covet things they shouldn't. Such people are just base. Her words, harsh though they were, made sense. I looked at my slender fingers. Indeed, my aspirations exceeded my abilities. I drifted aimlessly for days. Receiving occasional favors from Xiao Duke, I felt justified in standing there, doing nothing, like an ornamental piece. But what if one day Xiao Duke was displeased? What would be my fate then? I was, after all, just a maid. He needn't explain to anyone for dealing with a maid. My gaze darkened. By the time I finished the tasks others had pushed on me, the moon was high. I was thoroughly exhausted. Many tasks were new to me, so I learned as I worked, which took extra time. Returning to the servant quarters from the well, I passed by the water pavilion. There sat Xiao Duke alone, looking somewhat forlorn. I frowned, pausing my steps, uncertain whether to go straight or take a detour. Xiao Duke was burning paper money. The breeze carried the scent of burnt paper ash to me. Just as I decided to detour, I stepped on some dried leaves. The rustling sound was quite distinct in the quiet night. Xiao Duke's voice carried a note of displeasure. You are my chief maid. If you're not serving me, where have you been? He kept tossing the paper money into the fire. My throat felt dry. What? Since I'm a maid who doesn't meet his expectations, he's burning paper money to send me off in advance? Swallowing hard, I hurried over and knelt down with a thud. I was doing other tasks. I won't dare again. Spare me this time, young master. Since my stepmother entered the Qin household, I had learned to read faces and admit faults. Now that I was someone else's maid, if I wanted to live well, I must bend my back and knees when needed. Xiao Shuyuan raised an eyebrow, half smiling. Quite good at placating, aren't you? He looked tired, not asking me to rise. Patiently, he continued burning the paper money. Until Mrs. Xiao, his mother, kicked the burning basin over. A crisp slap echoed. The madam, dignified and furious. I quickly glanced up and lowered my head again. Xiao Shuyuan tilted his head, a faint red mark appearing on his face. The kicked-over ash scattered everywhere. I stared at his sleeve. The brocade had small burnt holes. It was from shielding me from the burning sparks earlier. You have no right to burn paper for your sister. Mrs. Zhao's voice was full of loathing. Xiao Shuyuan sneered, self-mockingly, yes, mother. The servants all kept their heads down. The scene lingered in an eerie stalemate for a few moments. Mrs. Xiao left briskly with her entourage, her expression stern. Mist rose from the water, and the lanterns in the pavilion gleamed dimly. The finely dressed young nobleman lowered his head, looking desolately sorrowful. Young master, my legs have gone numb, I broke the silence. Xiao Shuyuan tilted his head to look at me, emotion swirling in his eyes before they eventually calmed. Aren't you afraid? He asked. I smiled. The madam is indeed very intimidating, but as long as you're here, I'm not afraid. Xiao Shuyuan let out a laugh through his nose. You're really good at comforting people, little trickster. Seeing him in a better mood, I seized the opportunity. It's late and the dew is heavy. Young master, how about going back to rest early? It would also give me a chance to rest. My hands were so tired they felt like they could barely move. All right, he agreed. He stood up, dusted off his sleeves, and stepped around the ashes on the floor, leaving the pavilion. Clean this up thoroughly, and rinse the place 3 times. I looked at the water basin and couldn't help but smile bitterly. I hadn't eaten dinner yet and felt weak. Gritting my teeth, I finished cleaning and then went back to rest for 3 hours. I was awakened by a basin of cold water splashing over me. Even though it was early autumn, the water was very cold, jolting me awake immediately. What time do you think it is? How dare you linger in bed? Do you think you're paid to sleep? A sharp, acrid voice pierced the room. A figure in goose-yellow robes barged into view. The door was wide open, and I could see the other maids peeking in, gloating. It was Luli. She was a maid grown up in the Xiao house, and her mother was a stewardess. Though she was a second-class maid, she had considerable sway in Xiao Shuyuan's courtyards, almost on par with the head maid. I looked her in the eye. With one hand, I grabbed her by the neck and lifted her up to my face. Just another bully picking on the weak. We're different people, and there's no need to get along. Being assertive is more satisfying than trying to please her. The incident quickly passed, and everyone resumed their duties. Today, Xiao Shuyuan unusually stayed in, perhaps because the bruise from last night's slap wasn't completely gone. He sat under the porch as the head maids played guqin and mixed fragrances. At the other end of the courtyard, the persimmons were half ripe, and the young servants were climbing the trees to pick them. The little maids chattered and directed them. Xiao Shuyuan leaned on the railing, resting his head on his hand, smiling indulgently. Outside, Xiao Shuyuan had one demeanor. Within his courtyard, he showed another side. People indeed have many faces. Cousin, it's so lively here. A sweet voice suddenly broke the tranquility. The courtyard fell silent for a moment. Turning my head, I saw a young man in a moon-white robe embroidered with green bamboo, walking slowly with a charming girl. Obviously, the newcomers had special status. Following the crowd, I bowed. The two accepted the greeting without a glance, and it was Xiao Shuyuan who finally told us to rise. Everyone went back to their tasks, but the casual cheer was gone. The girl headed straight for Xiao Shuoyuan, her presence undeniable. The young man called Xiao Shuoyuan big brother, while the girl called him cousin. A sudden realization struck me, reminding me of widely known rumors about Duke Xiao's household. Before marrying Miss Lin as the Duchess, Duke Xiao had a childhood sweetheart he grew up with. They were deeply attached, but her family fell into ruin. Unable to defy his elders, Duke Xiao married Mississippi Lin, while his childhood sweetheart left town. Years later, the Duchess took her 5-year-old twins to visit her family in Chen County. On the way back, they were attacked by bandits. The bandits, having taken all their loot, wanted to kill them. Fortunately, a merchant widow who had lost her husband and son escaped to raise the alarm, saving the Duchess and her son. Even though Duke Xiao later led troops to wipe out the bandits, it couldn't bring back their lost twin, the precious daughter of the Xiao family. The Duchess was heartbroken. Meanwhile, Duke Xiao recognized the merchant widow as his long-lost childhood sweetheart. In gratitude and out of nostalgia, he brought her back home and made her his concubine 6 months later. The Duchess couldn't be bothered, focusing solely on her son and mourning her lost daughter each night. Until Duke Xiao brought back his niece from his wife's brother's family, a girl the same age as their lost daughter. With the niece's companionship, the Duchess slowly recovered, treating her like another precious daughter. By then, the servants called the Duke's childhood sweetheart second madam, since she bore Duke Xiao another son. In the Xiao household, the niece from the Lin family was treated as if she were the Duchess's own child, a proper member of the Xiao family. Now, this Miss Lin appeared with the concubine's son, a thorn in the side of her aunt, acting very intimate. One couldn't tell if she was too clever or foolish. Xiao Shuoyuan's kindly smiling face grew cold the moment Miss Lin spoke. Unfazed by his coldness, she sat next to him, eyes gleaming like daggers at me as I played the guqin. Her intentions were obvious. No wonder the maids were frozen with fear, they were witnessing Xiao Shuoyuan's entanglements with Miss Lin. Who would dare provoke Miss Lin, spoiled by the madam of the house? Cousin, I need a maid to accompany me to the osmanthus banquet. I think this girl playing the guqin will do nicely. Won't you let me have her? In the capital, noblewomen have their own hierarchy. At previous banquets, I usually mingled with civil officials' daughters, seldom interacting with the daughters of high-ranking nobility. Miss Lin might not recognize me, but if I went to the osmanthus banquet, someone surely would. Though I had resolved to survive, I didn't want to step out and invite unnecessary trouble for now. Feeling tense, I couldn't help but look at Xiao Shuoyuan. Xiao Shuoyuan's gaze was icy as he looked at Miss Lin and spoke bluntly. Why do you want everything? Miss Lin, who had been acting coquettishly, was stunned. Since entering and calling out Big Brother, the second young master had not spoken a word, but now he stepped in to smooth things over. It's just a maid. Mother dotes on her so much, how could brother not comply? He was just joking. Mr. Zhao's kindly advice was also a subtle jab, but Xiao Shuoyuan's expression remained indifferent. Miss Lin felt a bit humiliated, gave a hasty bow, and ran out. Mr. Xiao sighed and followed her. Though the two troublemakers left, the atmosphere in the courtyard grew even more somber. In the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the Duchess led the aggrieved Miss Lin back in front of Xiao Shuoyuan. The maids and servants in the courtyard stood silently with their heads bowed. I watched the green bricks on the ground as the Duchess scolded Xiao Shuoyuan without a care for his dignity. Qi Yan is your sister. She merely wants a maid, why can't you be more generous? An heir of a noble house, petty and small-minded, disrespectful, harsh to your sister. I told you to treat your sister well, and this is how you listen to me? The Duchess seemed to be waiting for Xiao Shuoyuan to respond. The courtyard was so quiet that you couldn't even hear breathing. This is too much. Even I felt a bit of sympathy for Xiao Shuoyuan. The Duchess's public scolding of her son for the whims of a niece was both laughable and absurd. She didn't care about Xiao Shuoyuan's reputation at all, treating her son as less important than her niece. From the servants' reactions, it was clear they were used to this in Xiao manner. Mother, whatever you say, goes. Xiao Shuoyuan's tone was incredibly weary. Auntie, cousin must have been joking earlier. It's Qian's fault, don't be angry. Lin Qian's tone carried a hint of coyness mixed with caution. With my head lowered, I couldn't see what was happening in front of me, but if I were Xiao Shuoyuan, I'd be disgusted right now. Silly child. The Duchess's tone was fond, but then she shifted. As a man, your heart should be more magnanimous than a woman's. There was a trace of resentment in the Duchess's voice towards Xiao Shuiyuan. Where did this resentment come from? My heart ached. The waters in the Xiao mansion were deeper than I had imagined. Despite his errant reputation outside, Xiao Shuiyuan was seen by the household staff as a generous and pleasant master. Always cheerful and handing out rewards generously, never making things difficult for anyone. If there were no other masters around and only Xiao Shuiyuan present, the atmosphere was always light and the work was done with smiles. Today, though, the atmosphere was heavy, even with no external masters visiting. The head maids packed up 2 chests. The servants carried them out of the courtyard, destination unknown. Xiao Shuiyuan, dressed simply, hadn't had breakfast and looked ready to travel. Everyone stopped what they were doing, watching him with earnest eyes. Suddenly, Xiao Shuiyuan smiled. Why the long faces? I'm not leaving forever. I'd only joined recently, isolated and out of the loop. So, when I followed Xiao Shuiyuan onto the carriage headed to Huguo Temple, I still didn't fully understand what had happened. Just a short stay at the temple to pray for blessings, why was everyone acting like he was going to face some terrible danger? In the end, it was Xiao Shuiyuan who made the final decision. He said I should go with him, the others should watch over the house. While I was packing, Luli came to sternly warn me. Once we were out, there were 5 or 6 carriages, accompanying the Duchess. The monks were already at the temple gate to greet us. The Duchess was dressed elegantly, with only a white jade hairpin in her hair. At the guest house, I quickly arranged Xiao Shuiyuan's belongings. It wasn't much, just 2 chests. Xiao Shuiyuan changed out of his simple robes into a wide cotton gown and opened a book of the Diamond Sutra, beginning to copy it. He woke at 3 a.m. and rested at 9 p.m., ate vegetarian, copied sutras, and chanted prayers. I thought someone like Xiao Shuiyuan, a hedonist from the secular world, wouldn't last 2 days before wanting to go home. But he was devout and sincere, not perfunctory at all. They come here every September for half a month. To pray for Xiyu. As Xiao Shuiyuan was devoted in his practice, the Duchess, who couldn't miss saving face even while praying, enjoyed 5 comfortable days of diligently chanting. The temple is on a mountain, with bandits occasionally roaming the area. From the 5th day on, the temple's warrior monks patrolled the surroundings. The monks informed all the guests. After dark, do not go outside the temple. Stay inside, and you will be safe. On the evening of the 6th day, the Duchess sent someone to invite Xiao Shuiyuan to admire the golden ginkgo trees behind the mountain. His expression was inscrutable. Do you think I should go? It seemed like he was asking me, but also talking to himself. Xiao Shuiyuan went without taking me. By the time it was completely dark, he still hadn't returned. I felt uneasy and went to the Duchess's courtyard, but was stopped at the door. I asked the gatekeeper when the madam had returned. The gatekeeper impatiently told me that the madam hadn't left the courtyard all day, so how could she have returned? I pushed past the gatekeeper and barged in. The white jade hairpin in the Duchess's hair was gone, replaced by a pearl hairpin. She was leisurely wiping her mouth, with a table full of the temple's famous vegetarian dishes in front of her. Your Grace, if you're not going to the back mountain, did you send anyone to inform the young master? I looked at Madame Xiao. She squinted at me. What a bold girl. He will come back when it gets dark. If he doesn't return, he must have gone wild somewhere. He's always been undisciplined. The mountain isn't safe these days. If he's foolish enough to run into danger, he deserves it. A flash of malice crossed Madame Zhao's eyes. She deliberately sent Xiao Shuiyuan out. I understood that clearly. A chill ran through my heart, and I found it absurd. Can there be such mortal enmity between a mother and her biological son? I turned and left the courtyard, seeking out the martial monks in the temple, requesting their assistance in searching for Xiao Shuiyuan on the back mountain. Fortunately, Xiao Shuiyuan holds some significance. Although the martial monks were displeased, they still agreed to go. We searched for an hour. We finally found Xiao Shuiyuan near a woodpile closest to the temple, his back injured and unconscious from blood loss. He had indeed encountered mountain bandits. The temple had basic medicinal supplies, so someone went to prepare medicine immediately. I sent the news to Madame Zhao's courtyard and then rushed to learn how to treat Xiao Shuyuan's wounds. It took several basins of bloody water before we finally got a basin of clear water. Xiao Shuyuan's brows knit tightly, teeth clenched. Though he was in pain and fainted, he still looked extremely stubborn. I stayed by Xiao Shuyuan's side all night. He held my hand tightly through the night. He was very uneasy, as if dreaming of something terrifying. I patted and patted until my hand cramped before he calmed down a bit. He didn't get better until morning. The monk said he would be fine after enduring the high fever. I breathed a little easier, just get through it. Though I hadn't spent much time with Xiao Shuyuan, I felt that living under him was at least better than under others. Otherwise, why would the servants of the Duke's mansion vie to work in Xiao Shuyuan's courtyard? After fetching breakfast from the kitchen, I took a detour to Madame Zhao's courtyard on the way back. Not a single servant had come to check on him all night. I felt a bit angry. But when I got to Madame Zhao's courtyard, I found it deserted. I went in and asked the novice monk who was sweeping. "The Duchess who used to live here, where has she gone?" The novice monk chanted a prayer and explained that Madame Xiao had gone down the mountain. Upon learning of Xiao Shuyuan's serious injury, news came from the foot of the mountain that Lin Qian had caught a cold. Even though 2 doses of medicine had cured most of it, Madame Xiao still hurriedly returned home overnight. When Xiao Shuyuan woke up and asked me if Madame Xiao had come, I told him the truth. He remained silent for a long time before releasing the white jade hairpin in his hand, which shattered on the ground. The dead can't compete with the living. The abbot of the Hubei temple personally examined Xiao Shuyuan's wounds. He suggested that Xiao Shuyuan stay at the temple for a few days to recover before returning home. Xiao Shuyuan nodded nonchalantly. When he was barely able to get up, someone came to his guest courtyard. Shuyuan. It was the eldest princess. I bowed my head in greeting. She opened her mouth to say something but glanced at me. My heart sank, and I was about to kneel. Xiao Shuyuan scolded me for not knowing my place and told me to get out and not to interfere with their conversation. I withdrew, feeling an indescribable emotion. I didn't know what Xiao Shuyuan and the eldest princess talked about. I only knew that the princess left both worried and happy. As I went in to clean up the bowl of medicine Xiao Shuyuan had finished. "Come over here." His voice was soft, revealing no emotions. Reluctantly, I moved to his bedside. He sat on the edge of the bed, changed the medicine. The wound on Xiao Shuyuan's back was bleeding again. I pursed my lips and my hand became heavier as I cleaned the wound. "Qin Shuyun." Xiao Shuyuan grabbed my arm, his tone icy. "Do you want to hurt me to death? How dare I?" The young master's authority, I respect and admire it. I realized my sarcastic tone and shut my mouth again. He seemed amused by his anger. "Are you mad at me? I scolded you in front of the princess for your own good. So you wouldn't hear something you shouldn't and lose your life prematurely." I slowly freed myself from Xiao Shuyuan's grip. "Oh. Tisk. Throwing a fit, are you? How foolish." A lump formed in my throat, and I couldn't help but speak. "Of course, I'm not as smart as young master." Knowing the back mountain was dangerous and still insisting on going to court death. Yes, Xiao Shuyuan knew that finding ginkgo nuts and jade hairpins were just Madame Zhao's excuses to lure him. Madame Xiao knew Xiao Shuyuan wouldn't refuse. Xiao Shuyuan knew Madame Xiao wouldn't show up. Not everyone is fit to be a mother. I looked at Xiao Shuyuan's darkening face and spoke earnestly. Sparks seemed to burst from his eyes, so I should just accept fate, huh? No. I shook my head. "You should just consider yourself unlucky." Xiao Shuyuan's sarcastic expression froze. The bond between mother and son is just a part of fate, not everything. One could say that part is just very unlucky. Accept it, and then continue to focus on other things. He said nothing more. Even when my shaky hand pressed harder, he didn't utter a sound. Just before I exited the room, he called out to me. "Qin Shuyun, if I say I can overturn the case for your Qin family, what will you do?" What would I do? I would stop at nothing. But at that moment, I just walked out the door. Because things must be done one step at a time. Xiao Shuyuan put down his pen after finishing copying the scripture just as the sun was setting. He gazed out the window and lost in thought for a moment. Have you seen the ginkgo tree at the back of the temple? His eyes fixed on me. I shook my head. Just heard of it. Behind the Hugwa temple, there is a 100-year-old ginkgo tree, so large that even two people couldn't wrap their arms around it. In the deep autumn, its fan-shaped leaves turn the whole world golden. I had actually seen it before. I'll take you to see it. He seemed more interested. When the vast golden scene came into view, the eldest princess, who was directing the servants, also noticed us. Xiao Yuan, come help us find Chuyang. She's missing, probably wandered into the mountains. The eldest princess is Xiao Yuan's aunt. Only when she was over 30 did she have a daughter, Chuyang, who is now just 5 years old and very precious. Xiao Yuan's expression turned serious, and after understanding the situation, he headed into the mountains. The sun had mostly set, so if Chuyang was just lost because she was playing, it wouldn't be too bad. But if she was taken by someone with bad intentions, finding her at night would be much harder. The plants on the roadside were all trampled, and a group of guards had already entered the mountain to search. Xiao Yuan occasionally bent down to inspect the path, not completely following the guard's route. I chatted with him intermittently, discussing whether the trampled plants were caused by humans or wild animals. Having studied painting under a master, I had some experience in identifying directions using the shapes of plants. The forest became increasingly dark, and a faint smell of blood drifted by. I felt a chill in my heart. Around a corner, there lay a wild boar gutted and lifeless. Xiao Yuan was still in a daze. My face turned pale, I bit my lip, squatted down, and touched the wound on the boar's belly. Xiao Yuan snapped out of it and quickly pulled me behind him. It's still warm, it must have died no more than a quarter of an hour ago. The person hasn't gone far, I said in a hoarse voice. With sharp eyes, I spotted a lustrous pearl among the pine needles on the ground. Xiao Yuan's face darkened. The eldest princess had mentioned that Chuyang was wearing pearl-embroidered shoes today. I led the people from the eldest princess back to the wild boar's location. The forest was pitch black. Xiao Yuan and I had split up earlier. I returned to inform the eldest princess. Xiao Yuan tracked while leaving marks for us to follow. I led the people along the marks we found. Through the dense forest, we discovered a small clearing that seemed relatively open. The marks ended here. The group extinguished their torches because there was a place in the valley brightly lit. Getting closer, we realized that a fire had broken out, with huts burning in rows. It had been a long time since it rained. Several people ran around trying to put out the fire, but the nearby creek was dry, making their efforts in vain. In the firelight, a shadow swiftly ran. Behind it chased several burly men shouting and killing. I pushed 2 guards to help. The princess's guards were excellent, but the other side had numbers, making it a difficult fight. A slightly shorter man met my gaze and swung his blade, aiming at Xiao Yuan's arm. Xiao Yuan was already heavily injured, carrying someone while running. His lips were pale, hands barely gripping his sword. I quickly collided with the short man, causing his blade to veer off track. It missed Xiao Yuan but grazed my cheek to forearm. The short man turned pale, quickly retreating into the shadows. Xiao Yuan glanced back. On his back, a child with an angelic face had several sooty marks but breathed evenly. It was the sleeping Chuyang. Though many more people emerged from the burning village, a blaze of torches surrounded us. The eldest princess arrived with reinforcements. Chuyang! Always graceful and noble, the eldest princess moved swiftly. She reached out anxiously but gentler when touching Chuyang. Once Chuyang was in her arms, Xiao Yuan sighed in relief, feeling a mix of desolation and comfort. There was nothing more for us to do. The scene was left to the command of the eldest princess's head guard. We followed the eldest princess back to Hugwa Temple. It wasn't until we reached the brightly lit area that I realized my outer garment was soaked with blood. Xiao Yuan turned to me, seemingly wanting to say something. Seeing my state, his pupils contracted, and his hands trembled even more. Early the next morning, the eldest princess left the mountain with Chuyang for the princess's mansion. However, she left the mansion doctor for me. I made it through the night without a fever, just needing rest. The bandits' village behind the dense forest was entirely dealt with by the princess's mansion. Before leaving, the eldest princess asked Xiao Shuoyuan if he would come down the mountain. Xiao Shuoyuan refused, as both of us needed to rest. He only asked the eldest princess to leave 2 people to help care for us. The eldest princess agreed, her eyes flashing slightly. By noon, a valet from the Duke Xiao came to check on us, bringing many medicinal materials. There was no word from the duchess's side. After sending away the valet, Xiao Shuoyuan tried to take the medicine bowl from my hands to feed me. I held the bowl. Young master, it's not appropriate. After all, I only injured one hand. Xiao Shuoyuan said nothing, just stared at me with his deep black eyes. Feeling guilty, I let him take the bowl. I dreaded taking medicine, my face scrunched up, feeling it was even more bitter than life itself. Xiao Shuoyuan lowered his eyes, his lashes like crow feathers, carefully blowing on the spoonful of medicine. In this world, there are mothers like Mrs. Qin, mothers like the eldest princess, and mothers like mine. Xiao Shuoyuan slowly began to speak. I was momentarily stunned and unconsciously drank the first sip of the medicine. Xiao Shuoyuan did not stop. He said that last night's Chuyang reminded him of himself at 5 years old. At that time, they encountered mountain bandits when returning from Qin County. The bandits demanded ransom. The ransom was already on its way. Somehow, the bandits suddenly learned that they were actually family members of the Duke's mansion. Knowing they would not end well, the bandits, driven by desperation, decided to kill these nobles to accompany them in death. Even with little time left, the bandits devised a truly heart-wrenching method. They forced Duchess Lin to choose which of her dragon and phoenix twins to die first. If she couldn't decide within the time of burning half an incense stick, then everyone would die together. The Duchess was in unimaginable grief. She knew that Duke Xiao was already on his way, and so did the bandits. Although simultaneous death was absolutely an unacceptable option, the Duchess had to choose one. Can you guess whom she chose? Xiao Shuoyuan put down the empty bowl and stuffed a candied fruit into my mouth. I was so absorbed in Xiao Shuoyuan's past that I didn't realize I had already swallowed a bowl of bitter medicine. Perhaps subconsciously, I thought Xiao Shuoyuan's ordeal was even more bitter than the medicine. No wonder Madame Xiao treated Xiao Shuoyuan so harshly. It turned out that she couldn't bear the guilt of having chosen Xiao Xiu to die and instead transferred all her resentment onto Xiao Shuoyuan. At that time, she feared Xiao Shuoyuan wouldn't survive, and now she resents him for surviving. His very existence constantly reminded Madame Xiao of her guilt. That's why she poured all her apologies onto Lin Qiyan, who was of similar age to Xiao Xiu. It wasn't that she particularly liked her niece, it was just that at that time, she felt worse than death and needed Lin Qiyan. Over the years, the companionship turned genuine amidst the guilt. Madame Xiao now treats Lin Qiyan no differently than her own daughter. But as for Xiao Shuoyuan, she can't stand to see him doing well. In her eyes, Xiao Shuoyuan lives by stepping over Xiao Xiu's dead body. Why should he have a good reputation and future? Living is enough. Xiao Shuoyuan's notorious reputation resonates throughout the capital, and she doesn't care. But if Xiao Shuoyuan is ever praised, Madame Xiao really becomes anxious. And the consequence of her anxiety is punishing him to kneel in the ancestral hall for various reasons. I recall secretly bringing food to Xiao Shuoyuan in the ancestral hall. Xiao Shuoyuan was kneeling on the ground. The green bricks had been worn out with 2 shallow prints from his many years of punishment. He could even sleep while kneeling, looking quite experienced. Becoming a dandy didn't happen overnight, it was cultivated through countless kneeling sessions in the ancestral hall. Telling others would only make them laugh. You might have a scar on your face, Xiao Shuoyuan's words pulled me back from my memories. His fingers lightly touched my cheek. The wound had already been treated with the best medicine brought by the eldest princess. Now it didn't hurt much. Really? I shrugged indifferently, a scar in exchange for a hand is worth it. He didn't comment further. I didn't treat you well after you entered the mansion. I scoffed inwardly, at least he's self-aware. On my arrival, he kicked out a big maid who treated me as a target. I stayed silent. Xiao Shuoyuan persisted in tracing the edge of the wound as if waiting for an answer. I felt the tickling sensation on my face. You said you have a way to overturn the Qin family's case. Finally, getting to the point. Xiao Shuyuan paused, his fingers left my cheek, and he took 2 steps back to scrutinize me. Is this your method? The bitter strategy? He laughed ambiguously and then walked away, flicking his sleeves. My throat felt slightly choked. Even though I knew the knife wouldn't fall on Xiao Shuyuan last night, I still felt a momentary panic. Xiao Shuyuan never came to feed me medicine again. The next half-month passed with an almost eerie calm between us. Before leaving, the last batch of medicinal materials sent from the princess's mansion included a letter. After reading it, Xiao Shuyuan told me with some reservation news, the Qin family might get rehabilitated and return soon. I grabbed his hand excitedly. Is this true? After receiving confirmation, I laughed foolishly for a long time before remembering to ask why. Why? The explanation was simple: the Qin family hadn't committed any serious crimes. The so-called betrayal of loyal officials was just the Qin family ending up on the lower hand in factional disputes, making them easy targets for their opponents. Both the inner court and the emperor could see this clearly. But handling the Qin family in a lighter manner was the most convenient way. After all, my father was outmatched, and the result was merely exile. Nobody lost their heads, it was already merciful. If anyone died on the way to exile, that was the Qin family's own problem. The eldest princess loved her daughter Chuyang dearly. Xiao Shuyuan and I saved Chuyang, akin to saving half of the princess's heart. Xiao Shuyuan asking the princess to plead for the Qin family wasn't a difficult favor for someone close to the emperor. The princess's favor isn't easily solicited. She wasn't afraid of Xiao Shuyuan making a request, she feared he wouldn't ask and instead leverage it over her later. As a bonus, the princess also wiped out some bandits, and it wasn't far from the capital. Achieving merit under the emperor's nose isn't easy. This time, the princess managed to get her idol prince consort a position as deputy minister of the Ministry of Rights. All in all, the princess had no reason to refuse. Thus, the chances of the Qin family's return were nearly 80%. The Qin family came back before the winter solstice. I went to the city gate to meet them. The former Qin mansion had been awarded to someone by the emperor. I took them to the house I rented in the capital. The capital city was full of unpredictable dangers. Even without doing anything, one could still end up in trouble. It was not suitable for someone like father, who lacked ambition. Father obtained a position to govern a remote area in S City. His qualifications were sufficient, and S City happened to be stepmother's hometown, so it all worked out well. Since we decided to leave the capital, we only rented a place to spend the rest of the year. When we settled in the rented house, stepmother gently touched the scar on my face, unable to speak. Father, always reserved, had tears in his eyes. Shuyun, you've done well. You saved our family, he said. Did I? I had done well. My birth mother died when I was young. Stepmother married into our family when I was around 4 years old. Stepmother came from an unremarkable background. Father brought her back during one of his trips. Few people knew that stepmother was actually the daughter of a former mountain bandit leader. The bandit leader robbed the rich to help the poor and never killed innocent people. In good years, he would even lead the villagers to plant crops. Stepmother fell in love with father at first sight when she was buying vegetables in town. She was kind to both me and my half-sister. When I was 5, she received a letter from her family saying her father was critically ill and asked her to go back for a final goodbye. I was very attached to her and insisted on going with her, crying and making a fuss. Who would have known it was a trap set by the second-in-command of the bandits? The second-in-command killed the leader and planned to kill stepmother to eliminate any future threats. Not only that, but they also kidnapped a group of wealthy travelers. That was the first time I met Xiao Shuyuan and the last time I saw Xiao Shiyu. Stepmother still had some loyal followers of the former leader. She pretended to get along with the second-in-command, taking a few days to find an opportunity to send a few hostages to report to the officials. The operation was rushed and exposed. The second-in-command decided to take a risky move and kill the hostages in anger. On the day Xiao Shiyu died, stepmother was just a step too late. She was newly pregnant with my younger half-sister then. Stepmother was heartbroken and disbanded the loyal followers overnight. Because the officials were already at the foot of the mountain. She asked me to free the hostages while she pretended to comply, preparing a feast laced with drugs. Xiao Shuyuan's mother was already delirious, clinging to Xiao Shiyu's outer garment, refusing to take a step. Xiao Shuyuan was silently crying. Time was running out. I had to take Xiao Shuyuan's mother's hand and pretend to be Xiao Shiyu. Since Xiao Shiyu and I were the same age, and Xiao Shuyuan's mother was out of her mind, I half-coaxed and half-tricked her down the mountain. Xiao Shuyuan held onto his mother's other hand tightly. Before long, we encountered the vanguard troops. The bandits were too drunk to notice. Stepmother's plan went smoothly. I let go of Xiao Shuyuan's mother's hand, and she grabbed mine in a panic. I pulled away and said Xiao Shiyu ran ahead to meet her father. Xiao Shuyuan's mother followed my words, then released Xiao Shuyuan and staggered down the mountain. It's okay now, people down there will help you. I patted Xiao Shuyuan's hand and turned to head back up the mountain. Xiao Shuyuan grabbed me. Don't go, you'll die. Tears were still on his face, like Shiyu. Sparks started on the mountain. I won't. I need to go back for my mother. You will. Xiao Shuyuan was inexplicably stubborn and refused to let go. I was anxious. I swear I won't get hurt. Then promise me you'll come straight down and meet us after you find your mother. He looked serious and held out his pinky. After the pinky swear, I rushed back up the mountain. Just at the entrance, I bumped into stepmother, who had been waiting anxiously. She picked me up. Girl, we're taking another route. Dizzy, I followed stepmother through the woods and crossed the river back to the main road. I sighed inwardly. We couldn't meet up with Xiao Shuyuan and the others. This memory was deeply etched in my mind, yet I rarely recalled it. Until father received an anonymous message warning that the Qin family was about to collapse, and he should prepare early. Father tested the waters with those in power and was devastated. In a hurry, he arranged marriages for his daughters, as the law did not implicate married daughters. When it was my turn, I refused. The anonymous message mentioned another way that might alleviate the Qin family's crisis. It said Xiao Shuyuan was secretly working for the emperor, monitoring officials. His words held weight with the emperor. The Qin family was just an unnecessary sacrifice. Whether the disaster could be avoided depended on Xiao Shuyuan's whim. So, stepmother sold me to Xiao Shuyuan as a maid. I was one of the few who knew Xiao Shuyuan's past. The message described Xiao Shuyuan as highly sentimental. I needed to get close to him and win his heart. The bandits who hurt Xiao Shuyuan and kidnapped Chuyang were the loyalists left behind by stepmother's father. They mingled in the bandit camp outside the capital. Stepmother used her last bit of influence to enlist their help. Not only did I shake Xiao Shuyuan to the point where he promised to help the Qin family, but I also overheard that the princess wanted Xiao Shuyuan to ask the emperor for an official position for her consort. Xiao Shuyuan said he could help with the position, but the person needed to achieve a small merit first. So, I gave the princess an opportunity to earn merit. I made arrangements to ensure I could take a blow for Chuyang and Xiao Shuyuan, enhancing my importance. The scars on my face and arms were minor injuries from the chaos. Seeking wealth in dangerous places, I was fortunate only to suffer minor injuries in the commotion. Moreover, because of my scars, Xiao Shuyuan and the princess felt even more guilty towards me. It was worth it, of course. I kept telling myself that. This was already all I could do. During the winter solstice, the eldest princess's mansion sent over colorful dumplings. It was a rare act of kindness for the Qin family, who had been neglected since returning to the capital. I went to the lantern festival. Xiao Shuyuan followed at a distance. I knew. But I felt somewhat ashamed to face him. After all, I had used him and let him get hurt. Used and discarded? Xiao Shuyuan found a moment to corner me. I took a deep breath and solemnly thanked Xiao Shuyuan. That's all you want to say? His features were delicate but gloomy. Feeling guilty, I averted my eyes. I couldn't possibly tell him how I had schemed against him. After placing a beautiful flying fairy lantern into my hands, Xiao Shuyuan turned and left. Holding the lantern with uncertainty, I wondered whether I should call him back. Unexpectedly, Xiao Shuyuan turned back after a few steps. His eyes were dark. Were the words you said to me that day true, or were you just deceiving me? I opened my mouth, wanting to ask which day and which words he meant. But instinctively, I knew I should just answer his question directly. They were true. Xiao Shuoyuan looked at me for a long while, then smiled handsomely. But the smile quickly faded, and he concealed his expression, a hint of self-mockery in his eyes. Little liar. He uttered the words with his thin lips. This time, he left without looking back. I felt a sense of loss. Last year had been tough, so the Qin family celebrated the new year simply. When the snow stopped, father decided to depart for S City to take up his post. The journey would take a month. Fortunately, everything had been arranged before the new year, so we just needed to set off. I felt somewhat depressed. The carriage passed through the city gates. I kept lifting the curtain. Until the city gates vanished from view, I tightly held onto the curtain. It wrinkled into a ball, but I did not lift it again. The carriage stopped at 10-Mile Pavilion, where father sent a message for a rest break. I lifted the curtain and saw that chestnut horse. The prized horse had once carried Xiao Shuyuan and Qin Shuyun to send off the Qin family. Now it carried Xiao Shuyuan again, coming to bid farewell to Qin Shuyun and the Qin family. Under his cloak, Xiao Shuyuan handed me a lacquered box containing 10,000 silver notes. A small clay stove in the pavilion warmed a pot of plum wine. I get flushed when drinking but still tilted my head back to finish my cup. Did you enjoy staying in the capital? I asked Xiao Shuyuan. He looked at me for a while before lowering his gaze and downing a cup of plum wine. Does it matter whether I enjoyed it or not? I abruptly got up, leaning on either side of his wrist and leaning over to look at him. If you didn't enjoy it, come with me. We'll go to S City, eat spicy hot pot, and drink sweet wine. A surge of emotions rose within me as I looked at Xiao Shuyuan's face. He looked up and lightly touched the scar on my cheek with his fingers. You're drunk, little liar. The steward beside my stepmother helped me back to the carriage. I looked back and saw that Xiao Shuyuan was sitting in the pavilion, half hidden behind a cup, and then another. Once on the carriage, my face expressionless, I opened the lacquered box. Besides the silver notes, there was a thick letter. After reading it, I tore it up and threw it into the brazier. I watched the paper turn to ash, every word burned away. Xiao Shuyuan knew everything. So the emperor would not easily let him go. I stopped the carriage and ran to Xiao Shuyuan in the pavilion, picking up a sachet that had fallen beside him. As I stood up, I spoke softly. I will wait for you. I did not know if he heard me. Once back in the carriage, I fell deeply asleep, tears leaking from the corners of my eyes. After leaving the capital, I fell gravely ill. We did not reach S City until the spring equinox. After recovering, I rarely mentioned the capital again. Neither its events nor its people. Though my stepmother did not grow up in S City, the blood of S City flowed in her veins. She thrived there, which benefited my father's policies greatly. I rejected many eligible young men and opened a bookshop called Yellow Crane Bookstore. Spending my days there. I posted job listings and prepared the finest brush and ink, hoping to attract first-rate artists or calligraphers. Guests came and went, but I never saw a familiar face. When my half-sisters in the capital had each given birth to their second children, they were still dissatisfied with my solitary life. However, far from the imperial court, they could only vent through letters. My stepmother had lost hope. Father seemed to understand and said little. They now focused on my brother, who had become a Jiren, hoping to arrange a good marriage for him. Life was busy yet enjoyable. That mid-autumn festival, we held an appraisal event at the bookstore, attracting many scholars and artists. The bookstore garden's ginkgos began to turn yellow. When I opened a ginkgo painting, I was struck by its beauty. The more I looked, the more my breathing quickened. Until I saw the signature, and my hands trembled. I picked up and put down the painting repeatedly, afraid I was hallucinating. Father happened to visit the bookstore during his half-day off. I carefully carried the painting to him. Once he nodded, I collapsed into the armchair. The ginkgo was the same one from the hillside behind Hugua Temple in the capital. Under it was Xiao Shuyuan and I, from that year watching the ginkgo leaves. Few in the capital knew that the dandy Xiao Shuyuan excelled in both painting and calligraphy. The ginkgo leaves had fallen 5 times. Qin Shuyun finally welcomed back her lover.